Right, I suppose I better make another one. The Klinkhamer Special. Let's go. Hi everyone and welcome. So this is going to be a great fly for all you small stream enthusiasts, but Klinkhamers are just at home, not only on those small streams but also on the main stems. This is a pattern that imitates emerging upwings, emerging sedge, and they really come into their own on those faster, more broken waters. If you're looking for a pattern which is buoyant, really robust, and you can see it from a mile off, this is one for you. If you're also looking for a pattern which is fantastic in either a duo, New Zealand style, or Klink and Dink setup, look no further. So before we get into the pattern itself, let's take a quick overview of the pattern as well as the materials we'll need. The Klinkhamer Special then needs no introduction. Developed by Hans van Klinken in the 1960s, the pattern has come to be known as probably one of the world's most widely used flies. I simply love this pattern. When fishing my home waters of the River Usk or the small streams, both in South Wales of the UK, its buoyancy and ability to bring fish up when prospecting for trout is simply amazing. In this video I tie a close resemblance to the Klinkhamer Special, and we'll also take a look at the waters I like to fish it on and the environments that I pretty much live in through the summer. So I've been tying paradon or hackled dry flies for, I feel old. I've been tying them for a while. And for the small streams of South Wales and the UK, this is pretty much one of my go-to flies. Don't be put off though, as I mentioned, this is one of those patterns which is just at home on the smaller streams, the larger freestone rivers, and when I'm not targeting rising trout, this is a fantastic pattern for prospecting too. The Klinkhamer is highly buoyant, crazy visible, and when it's tied correctly is absolutely amazingly durable. But before we get into the materials and the tying itself, let's just take a look at some of the waters that I call home. And firstly, I mentioned small streams. Small streams can range from anything from the steep, almost off the side of a mountain steep and fast flowing, to the smoother, slower, meadow-like environments. They usually both have a requirement to hike in and out, and the silver lining of that, of course, is that small streams are usually under pressured. So due to the nature of these smaller rivers and the fact that they usually rise and fall pretty quickly with any rain, food sources can sometimes be quite scarce in some of the tributaries, certainly when compared to the main stems. So the fish are as advantageous as they come. They need to be right. If they were too inquisitive about the food they chose to eat, the food would quickly be downstream of them. As such, takes can be super fast and super violent, so you need to be quick and your fly needs to be able to take an absolute beating. And if you put the time in, and with a bit of extra luck, you might be able to hook one of those larger fish. So with that background out of the way, let's take a look at the materials. So firstly, I'm using the Fulling Mill Living Larva hook, and I absolutely love this model. It's strong, has a 3x extended shank, and works perfectly for Klinkhamer style flies. So in this video I'll be tying on a size 12, perfect for the smaller rivers I fish, but if I fish the main stems then I tend to reduce that to size 14s or 16s. For the thread, I'm using white Nano Silk, which is really the only colour I tend to use these days. Again, I'm looking for strong ingredients, so you don't get much stronger than this. But more so, the thread kind of vanishes into next to nothing if you've used it in the past. As I'm tying on the size 12, it's a pretty meaty hook, right? So I'll be using two threads in different thicknesses or deniers today. a size 12/0 for the main body and thorax, and then 18/0 for tying off the hackle. I'll come on to this piece during the tie-in, but for smaller flies I really only use the 18/0. But bigger flies, that 12/0 is just awesome. So in Hans van Klinken's original LT Caddis and the subsequent Klinkhamer Special, the body utilised the fly right dubbing, specifically number 19 or the light tan. But here I'm using Fuller Mill Tactical Dry Fly Dub, specifically in the March Brown shade. These synthetic superfine style dubbings are just fantastic, as they don't take on much water, which ultimately prevents the fly from drowning. But you want a buggier looking body, it's fine. Use natural material. Hare's ear, for example. That works a treat and gives the fly a more lifelike look, with the spiky material possibly imitating maybe the gills of an emerging nymph. But do think about how that material might impact the fly as it soaks in more water. The thorax, I love how Peacock Herl looks. Just look at that, it's pretty awesome stuff. And if you source good quality Herl, the brittleness that some folk kind of talk about it being brittle, it's just not a thing. That said, again, if you want to use a different material, dub thoraxes also work and look great. But again, just think how those materials might potentially take on more water and potentially impact that fly's floatability. For the Wingpost, now I've used a lot of materials for Wingposts over the years. Tiemco Aerodry was probably one of the best, but that was just a bit of a nightmare to source in the end. So what I'm looking for here is something bright, and it needs to be right, as the waters I'm targeting are often broken. There's a lot of silvery water with white flecks. It's turbulent, there's a lot going on, so I need that pattern to scream at me from a distance. So Fuller Mill's Fluoro Parapost Yarn is just, this image isn't really popped. It's that bright, it's crazy. And when I say screams at you, it's perfect. It's the best I've used to date, and it is just fantastic. It also sits nice and straight, which some alternatives that I've used kind of bunch up, they go a bit scraggly, and it just ends up in a ball of fluff. So today I'm going to be using a single strand, which I'll double over and tie in, and then when I come to pull the wing post up, I'll essentially be drawing all 4 strands up. Now, the hackle, probably the most important ingredient in this pattern without doubt. It's a highly buoyant fly, and this only comes from the hackle. So some folk talk about the wing post, often, it boasts buoyant properties, which they do. They're made in tube-like fashion, which they are, and as a result, hold air, which to a degree, they do. However, the wing post is always above the hackle, right? And it never touches the water. So the buoyancy properties simply don't come into play when these yarns are used as wing posts. It's just not possible. The true buoyancy ingredient in any paradun style fly comes, without a doubt, from the hackle. So, Whiting Farms, in my opinion, create the best rooster hackles on the planet. Now, this is just my opinion, right? I've tied with a lot of hackles over the years, but I only tie with Whiting now because they're just consistently brilliant. The hackle fibers are super stiff, so when they're incorporated into these, paradun style flies, they allow the pattern to sit perfectly thanks to that surface tension created by that hackle. And these chickens, it's worth calling out, these chickens have a hell of an amazing life too. So evidenced in the quality of their feathers, right? So stress in any sort of bird often results in patchy pelts and damaged feathers. That's just where the stress shows. So then a good cape or saddle will last you years, right? Unless you're tying commercially, then you're going to get the bald spots, the golden zone on a cape, not so much a saddle, but these will last years. So if you've never tied with white hackles, bear all these great, amazing things in mind when you see the price. They've increased and rocketed over recent years. So that said, like any tool in our fly tying armory, buy the highest quality materials that your budget will allow. All right, everyone's budget's different, but if you can and you're looking to spend the money, then this sort of area is where you'll want to invest. And it is an investment. So, top quality tools, ingredients, they always ensure that our tying is easier because the ingredients we're using are better. But that will result really with your flies being more durable, and with that, your confidence in fishing the patterns will absolutely be higher. So firstly then, I've mounted the hook in the vise. I crushed the barb, and you'll also notice that I've straightened or bent the hook shank slightly, just so it gives a bit of profile when it's in the water. And next up, I'm just going to go in with my 12/0 thread, and I'm just going to lay a good foundation for this thorax, which is pretty much the bend that I've put into the hook, right? Then I'm just going to wind my thread to the midway point, ready for the wing post. So for the wing post, I'm just going to take one strand of the yarn, which I've doubled over. Hopefully you can see that gap in the middle there. So this is essentially 2 strands, which I'll then tie in at that midway point. And you can see here that I've just slid the yarn under the thread and parked it on top of the shank. And then with a few securing turns, I'm just parking my thread at the rear of the wing post. When I'm ready, I'm just going to draw those essentially 4 strands of the wing post up, and I'm going to start in touching turns, starting to wind up the wing post, and then in touching turns I'll wind back down. The wing post is nice and vertical, but now I kind of want to lock that in place, right? I don't want it sliding around the shank, and I don't want it bending back and forward. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a load of securing locking wraps in front and behind to really bookmark that post in place. So now onto the hackle. So I've taken a Cree hackle, you can use whatever you want. I've prepped it, cleared up the end a little, and I'm just going to tie that in facing me and shiny side out. So if you can't see clearly what I'm doing here, you'll see that in the next frame. So with that secured, in touching wraps, I'm going to tie the hackle into the wing post by touching turn all the way up to the top of the post and then back down. Now here you can see I've not snipped the tag end of that stem, of the hackle stem. What I'm going to do is actually incorporate that into the body, and that L-shape stem actually gives us a bit more security, so that's not going to pull out. Now with the stem tied in, I've taken my thread all the way down to the bend of the hook, and I've just moved the hook in the vise just to make things a little bit easier for me, and gives me a nice horizontal platform to tie on. Now when I'm ready, at the end of the hook or the bend, I'm going to take my dubbing and create a dubbing rope or noodle, and I'm looking to really just form a nice tapered body with the dubbing. But of course there's a couple of ways we can do that, so I'm going to show you a couple just in a moment. But essentially, of course, we want it thinner at the butt end and then thicker at the thorax. And as I mentioned, there's a couple of ways we can do this. So I'm just going to wind forward and then I'll park. So I've wound all the way to the thorax, and you'll notice my body's a little bit thin. So what I'm doing, I'm just taking another pinch of the dubbing there, and I've just added it to the thread, and you can see all essentially I'm doing is just layering up slightly. So this essentially, you can either form that nice taper fully with dubbing, or you can layer up. So with the body done, I'm just going to take the 3 strands of Peacock Herl. Now I've trimmed the tips on these. So again, much like the post, I'm going to go under the thread and park on top, and then when I'm ready, I'm just going to draw those back. And then with a few secure turns, I'm just going to catch that down. So once tied in, I'm going to make one gentle turn around the shank, and then I'm just going to give it a bit of a twist. So what I'm doing here is just adding a bit of security to that Peacock Herl. So if one strand, for example, got nicked by maybe a trout's tooth, the whole lot isn't going to unravel, only maybe one strand. Then I'm going to wind that herl forward and build up that thorax. So just covering all of the white thread. And then finally, I'm just going to catch down the herl and tie that off. Then I'm going to take my whip finish tool, give it a nice whip finish behind the eye, snip off the tag end, and then give that Peacock Herl a trim. So that's the body and the thorax done, right? But I've just got one cleanup task to do. So for this, I've just moved the hook in the vise once more. And what I'm looking to do is just remove any sort of major straggly fibers which might prevent the pattern from sitting exactly as I want it. I've changed the hook in the vise once more just to give this a good horizontal platform to tie on. And then I'm going to go in with my 18/0 thread this time, and in touch and turns I'm going to take that thread all the way down to the base of the wing post. So the final task, I'm just going to take that hackle and in touch and turns I'm going to wind that down to the base of the wing post nice and tight, and you'll notice that the hackle fibers splay perfectly. So when we get down to the base of the wing post, I'm just going to wrap 2 times over the hackle and then one underneath as a nice locking wrap. Then I'll make a hand whip finish with 3 nice strong wraps, draw the thread through and then snip off. Right, we're almost there. So all we need to do now is snip the post, and for this I measure the wing post by the length of the hackle, and you can do that easily with your scissors, just as I'm doing there. Snip the size, you can make it shorter or longer if you want, but this is just what I like. And there we have it, the Klinkhamer Special. So there we have it, the Klinkhamer Special, or my tying of it. I think you'll find it pretty close to the original with only a few alternative materials used. The pattern, as I mentioned, is fantastic as a single fly in its own right, and also for a pattern when you're looking to either prospect a water or use in that duo rig. If you're yet to tie Klinkhamers or paradun patterns in any sort of style, give them a go, get them in the water, and please do let me know how you get on. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback in the comment section below. Likewise, feel free to subscribe to the channel and you'll get notifications each time I create new videos. And if you're interested in following me on either Instagram or Facebook, feel free to check out the relevant links. So until next time, happy tying, and I'll see you soon.